Dad, years ago, and I don't know how you brought it up, you mentioned to me that you wanted the last lines of your eulogy to be the final line from Norman Maclean's A River Runs Through It. I am haunted by waters. I never asked why. We had fished together many times. We rode the bumpy waves of Wood, Okanagan, Oyama, and Beaver Lakes together many times. We bought kayaks. We ran together in our unfinished yard, dancing in rainstorms when I was only a toddler. We drove as a family, watching storms roll in across the prairies, rain pounding with a mixture of hail, like cold knuckles beating against our car's windows. We dug feverishly to re-ditch along the sides of our road and protect our property from runoff rooster-tailing up from upland lakes that we so peacefully fished. Together, we walked across parts of Wood Lake in the winters, when it still got cold enough to freeze. But I never fully understood your request for me to end your eulogy with, I am haunted by waters. Perhaps I would have understood you more if we had sat down to record your stories, as we had prepared for only days before you fell down the stairs at home. I neatly packaged my cameras and voice recorders and asked you to sit down the next weekend together to share the stories you didn't always openly share about your time working in northern Manitoba, the coast of BC, and then throughout the interior of BC. You agreed, and I felt like I had won the golden ticket to learn more about you, my first hero. And it never happened. But I think I might have it. There's no single reason, and maybe no reason we could put to words, that could explain your request. You spoke so fondly of your time swimming at the Y in Winnipeg, where you competed in swimming as well as playing water polo. You swam so quickly in your tryouts for the Mexico Olympics in 1968 that you lost track of distance during the backstroke and outright swam up onto the poolside, like a fish in a lake too full, leaping up from the surface, sacrificing comfort just to get some space. You found that space, falling in love with fishing and swimming at the Whiteshell, Nunavik Lake, Barrier Bay. Leaping from boathouse rooftops and off of Blueberry Hill. You fell in love with the peace of the waters, the pull of the currents, the rain on the empty roads at the lake, the thrills of friendship found in cabins along the waterfront. And at the lake, you fell in love with Mum. You got married, you worked up north in shifts away from everything you loved, taking bush planes over speckled lake landscapes of tundra and snowmobiles with rifles nearby to traverse winter roads where wolves and bears presented risk at any time and no time. The risk was the bush plane sputtering, or the ice roads above the waters you loved. This time changed you forever. My sense of it is that you had some close calls in northern Manitoba, some too close. Too much chance to fall into the waters on your snowmobile, like your best friend Carrie, who suffered this exact fate. And this, I think, changed you forever. You rarely spoke of him, but I don't think you ever found another friend like him. A part of you stayed with him. A part of you stayed up north. But you brought the rest of you to BC with Mum. You worked in coastal fishing communities and with people who changed you forever, over fresh seafood and warm beer at the edge of campfires and in musty paper map-filled work trucks. You and Mum finally settled by the water, overlooking Wood Lake, a couple of years after you had me. You taught me to swim in Wood Lake, how to tie a knot in fishing line at Oyama Lake. You taught me about how water, running downhill on the undersides of glaciers, shaped Wrinkly Face Mountain on the way up to Beaver Lake. You and I watched the news, and you taught me about catfish while we watched the Red River floods in your old stomping grounds. You taught me about your time working on winter roads when you became responsible for Lake Country's roads. And you taught me about people, community change, humor and wit in the face of challenges. Your history and your career with water running through it. Dad, you continued to teach me as you retired and became a grandpa to Morgan, then Sullivan. Every time you spoke of them, and Laura, with me alone you seemed to tear up. You loved the time in the pool with them. As you lost mobility, you seemed to retain strength and grace in your pool. Things added up against you in your final years when you slipped in the rain at the White Shell while on vacation and broke your hip a few years ago. It seemed to be the progression of decline. You fell a number of times in your final years, the fluid in your joints from rheumatoid arthritis making each recovery more difficult. I wanted to hear your stories, as with each fall I became more afraid it would be your last, and I'd never get to hear them. So when we agreed to sit together outside on your deck and record something, I was thrilled. Many of your coworkers, now my coworkers, would mention your stories to me. Stories I'd never heard myself, echoed and translated by people secondhand. We were going to record your story. Your stories. Maybe with this together, I could piece together what I know, what I've put in place here, with your untold story. And I would know why you were so attached to the final line in a book you rarely discussed or picked up. But I think some of these stories, the good and the bad, were where you lived. You stayed at the lake, with that love for fishing in summer storms, the love for winter air so humid frozen it closed your nostrils, and hot summer roads so wet with rain and slick from asphalt and oil, the love for adventure disconnected from everything but those white shell cabin friendships, and the love you found with Mum. You were always there, and everything else over time was pulling you away, but you held on. Your life, with all of its pains and losses and all of its love and joy, was reflected by this time, and in this time. It shaped you, and by extension, it shaped me. You taught me to build communities and something bigger than ourselves. You taught me how to be a father and a husband, and a more complete person. Some of your final words to me expressed that you had regrets, and that, I think, is that you wanted not to dwindle in care or isolation. You wanted to be at the waterfront, watching the waves and the fish jumping, the leaves in the wind, and beside us. But now we wouldn't get this. Here you are now, in my memories, and in my stories. You found a state of flow fittingly in the water and by the water, and you chased it to calm your mind, which longed for it. Here you are, still teaching me, as I sit by the edge of the lake. Eventually, all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. The river was cut by the world's great flood and runs over the rocks from the basement of time. On some of the rocks are timeless raindrops. Under the rocks are the words, and some of the words are theirs. I am haunted by waters.